The argument had been loud, almost theatrical. 4 panelists volleying sound bites across the CNN studio, their voices layered in heated overlap. But then, everything shifted. Anderson Cooper raised his hand. His voice, steady but uncharacteristically strained, sliced through the clamor. The room fell still. Camera operators froze mid-pan, their eyes darting to one another, as if to confirm what they'd just heard. Cooper slowly removed his black-framed glasses, leaning forward, a gesture viewers rarely witnessed from the veteran anchor who had weathered wars, disasters, and political firestorms without betraying a flicker of emotion. "Congresswoman Crockett, could you repeat that?" The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. At the center of the table sat Jasmine Crockett, the freshman congresswoman who had already begun carving out a reputation as a sharp, unflinching voice on Capitol Hill. She lifted a document with calm precision. Her composure contrasted sharply with the unease spreading across the face of Richard Thornton, the Republican strategist seated across from her. "This memo," Crockett said firmly, "was written by your own client last Tuesday. It contradicts everything you've been saying on this network for weeks." The words hit the studio like a thunderclap. Thornton's complexion drained. The memo, dismissed seconds earlier as liberal propaganda, now stared back at him in black and white. And in that moment, it wasn't just the panelists who grasped the magnitude of what was unfolding. Millions of viewers at home were watching deception collapse under the weight of evidence. Then came the moment no one expected. Anderson Cooper broke the invisible code of cable news, the rule of neutral detachment, and said something so raw, so unscripted, that clips of it would dominate social media before the broadcast even ended. Before we reveal Cooper's extraordinary response and the contents of that explosive memo, take a second to subscribe and turn on notifications. Because here, unlike the endless noise of mainstream spin, we focus on those rare televised moments when truth cuts through, when facts shatter performance and honesty cannot be ignored. To understand why this single exchange shook Washington and reverberated across America's political landscape, we need to step back, look at who these players are, and why this panel was never supposed to make headlines. Anderson Cooper is not your typical anchor. Born into one of America's most famous dynasties, the Vanderbilt family, he could have lived a life of quiet privilege. Instead, after Yale, he carved his own path, self-producing raw, unfiltered reports from some of the world's darkest places. Rwanda, Bosnia, Myanmar, places where truth was dangerous and where his reputation for unflinching honesty was forged. Over 3 decades at CNN, Cooper has won 8 Emmys, not for theatrics, but for his meticulous preparation and relentless pursuit of clarity. His trademark poker face has become cultural shorthand. The Anderson Cooper look, expressionless yet piercing, absorbing everything while revealing nothing. That night, however, even he was visibly shaken. Opposite him sat Jasmine Crockett, representing Texas's 30th district. Before Congress, she had been a civil rights attorney in Texas, known for taking cases others feared to touch. Her background in data analysis gave her a unique edge, the ability to dissect information with surgical precision, spotting inconsistencies where others saw only noise. Since her arrival in Washington, Crockett had built a reputation not for fiery speeches, but for dismantling arguments methodically, turning opponents' words and documents back against them. And that night, in front of a national audience, she did exactly that. Her target was Richard Thornton, a Republican strategist with 6 presidential campaigns under his belt. Thornton was seasoned in the art of televised combat. For weeks, he had toured cable news sets, insisting that allegations of Republican governors coordinating immigration policies with private prison contractors were baseless. His confidence had held until Crockett dropped the memo. Flanking the table were Dr. Melissa Chen, a conservative Stanford political scientist, and Marcus Washington, a Democratic speechwriter turned MSNBC contributor. Their roles, like the night's debate itself, were supposed to follow the familiar rhythm of partisan jousting. The producers expected sparks, not revelations. Instead, viewers witnessed something rare, a script flipped in real time, a live debate that transformed into a public reckoning, where facts pierced through rehearsed talking points. Anderson Cooper, caught between the silence and the truth, would soon deliver a line that made history. Have you ever seen someone use hard evidence to dismantle a narrative built on spin? Share your story in the comments. We want to know when you've seen truth break through the noise. Whether in the media or in your personal conversations, you've probably seen debates that feel like noise, passion without clarity. That was exactly how the CNN studio felt that night. The set carried the familiar drama of prime-time political television. Red and blue lights pulsing against polished glass. 5 panelists arrayed in a deliberate semicircle. Cameras gliding silently on tracks. Producers whispering in Cooper's ear to keep time. Everything about the scene suggested another predictable exchange of talking points. Anderson Cooper began with his usual gravitas, laying out the allegations. Republican governors accused of coordinating with private detention companies to craft immigration policies designed not just for security, but for profit. Then he turned to Richard Thornton, the Republican strategist, polished to perfection in his navy suit and red tie. Your clients have consistently denied these claims, Cooper said. What do you say to critics who argue these policies can't possibly be coincidental? Thornton leaned in, his voice dripping with confidence. Anderson, Americans are tired of these baseless conspiracy theories. My clients are doing what's necessary to protect their states from this administration's border crisis. Not one shred of evidence shows any coordination with private companies. None. Cooper gave no visible reaction, pivoting smoothly to Marcus Washington, the Democratic analyst. Critics say you have no proof. Is this just political theater? Washington delivered the expected rebuttal. The pattern speaks for itself. Republican governors, across multiple states, pushing identical policies, and private prison companies who just happen to donate millions stand to benefit. Sometimes the evidence is overwhelming, even without a so-called smoking gun. The debate spiraled quickly. Thornton scoffed. Washington pressed harder. Dr. Melissa Chen interjected with states' rights arguments. The rhythm was familiar. Raised voices, clashing sound bites, noise without resolution. The kind of segment that fills airtime but rarely informs. Until Anderson Cooper turned his gaze to the one person who had been silent. Congresswoman Crockett, you've been listening. As a member of the Oversight Committee, what's your perspective? That question flipped the script. Instead of rushing into partisan talking points, Jasmine Crockett paused. The silence stretched, drawing every eye in the studio. Her expression was calm, almost surgical. Anderson, she began, I've heard Mr. Thornton repeat for weeks that there is no evidence, no communication between his clients and private detention contractors. She reached into a folder no one expected. I find that interesting, she said evenly, because here I have a memo dated just last Tuesday from Governor Landry's office to South Star Detention Services. Thornton's practiced confidence cracked, just slightly. It's called the Interstate Enforcement Initiative, Crockett continued. She held up the paper, letting the camera zoom in. It outlines direct coordination between the governor's office and South Star to, quote, optimize processing volumes to meet contracted capacity requirements. And it instructs staff to publicly maintain that these decisions are about security, with no reference to contractor obligations. The silence was deafening. Even Marcus Washington, who might normally leap to amplify the point, sat stunned by the precision of her evidence. Anderson Cooper leaned forward, breaking his usual composure. "Congresswoman, how did you obtain this document? And can you verify its authenticity?" This was the breaking point, the moment where most gotcha moments collapse under scrutiny. But Crockett was ready. "This document was given to the Oversight Committee by a whistleblower from Governor Landry's administration," she said. "We verified it through metadata analysis and confirmed it with 2 additional sources. More than that, visitor logs match the memo exactly, showing Southstar executives meeting with the governor's staff on the same dates listed here." Her eyes locked on Thornton. "Mr. Thornton, you've said on this network 17 times this month that no communication exists. This memo proves otherwise." The strategist tried to regroup. "Congresswoman, I haven't seen this alleged document. Selective quotes out of context are no substitute for the full picture. If your committee has concerns, there are proper channels instead of ambushing guests on live TV." It was a familiar deflection, but Crockett was ready for that too. "Actually, Mr. Thornton, we did follow proper channels. This memo was sent to Governor Landry's office 2 days ago as part of our official request. His office acknowledged receipt and asked for 2 weeks before responding." She let the weight of her words hang in the air. The room was no longer just tense, it was electrified. Everyone knew the balance had shifted. The knockout didn't come with shouting, it came with precision. "Yesterday," Crockett said, her tone unshakable, "you told Fox News, and I quote, 'We've reviewed everything the Democrats claim to have, and there's absolutely nothing showing any communication with contractors.'" She let the words hang before delivering the strike. "Either you reviewed this memo and misrepresented its contents, or the governor's office withheld it from you before sending you on national television to issue categorical denials." Thornton's face drained. Political operatives are trained to parry ambushes, but Crockett wasn't improvising. She was dismantling. Dr. Chen tried to steer the conversation back toward broader border security, but Anderson Cooper, recognizing the gravity, cut her off gently. "Dr. Chen, I want to stay on this specific point. Mr. Thornton, Congresswoman Crockett, has presented what appears to be documentary evidence contradicting your repeated statements. Would you like to respond directly?" Thornton bought time with a sip of water. "Anderson, I stand by my statement. There's been no improper coordination. Without seeing this document in full, I can't comment on cherry-picked lines taken out of context." It was a weak defense. Cooper pressed, his voice even sharper. "Just to clarify, are you suggesting this document doesn't exist, or that Congresswoman Crockett is misrepresenting it?" Thornton squirmed. "I'm saying that without reviewing it myself, I can't comment on something clearly being weaponized for partisan purposes." That's when Crockett slid the folder across the desk. Calm. Surgical. Deadly. "Mr. Thornton, I'm happy to provide you with a copy. You'll see the governor's chief of staff's signature and—" She paused, letting the cameras catch her eyes locked on him. "A distribution list that includes your email address, confirming you personally received it last week." The air cracked. Audible gasps echoed through the studio. This wasn't political theater anymore. It was documented evidence cornering a seasoned strategist live on national television. Anderson Cooper, maintaining fairness but with unmistakable edge, turned back to him. "Richard, Congresswoman Crockett says this memo was sent directly to you. Is that accurate?" Every second of silence stretched into an eternity. Thornton's eyes darted to the document, his mask slipping as recognition flickered across his face. His confident facade collapsed into something closer to panic. "Mr. Thornton," Cooper pressed, voice cutting through the silence. "Have you seen this document before?" Thornton cleared his throat. "I receive hundreds of emails every week, Anderson. I can't be expected to recall every—" Crockett cut in with surgical precision. This wasn't routine. It was marked high importance. It was sent Tuesday. The subject line referenced talking points for media appearances. It landed in your inbox with a red flag. The strategist's defenses finally cracked. His tone shifted, defensive yet weary. Look, my job is to represent my client's positions in the media. I communicate what I'm instructed to communicate. It was the unthinkable, an admission. Not a spin, not a denial, but a glimpse behind the curtain of political messaging. An operative acknowledging that his public statements directly contradicted documents he'd seen. Anderson Cooper, sensing the historic moment, removed his glasses completely. Regular viewers knew the gesture was rare. He leaned forward, eyes locked on Thornton. Richard, just so we're absolutely clear, you are acknowledging that you were aware of communication between Governor Landra's office and private detention contractors regarding immigration enforcement policies, while publicly denying that any such communication existed. Thornton glanced off camera, at a handler perhaps, or just for escape, but there was none. Anderson, he said finally, my role is to articulate my client's positions. The way these communications are being framed is political spin. It was no longer a denial. In the coded world of political strategy, it was a surrender. Cooper pivoted instantly. Congresswoman Crockett, beyond this memo, does your committee have evidence of similar coordination with other governors? This was the moment she had been waiting for, the chance to expand from one explosive revelation into a damning pattern. Her voice remained steady, deliberate. Yes, Anderson. The committee has obtained documents from 3 additional states. The language is nearly identical. Capacity requirements, public messaging instructions. And more troubling, evidence shows these policies were first discussed at a private retreat in Colorado last year. Detention contractors met with governor's staff, explicitly projecting revenue increases based on higher detention rates. The silence in the studio wasn't just shock anymore, it was recognition. Viewers at home knew they were watching not another talking points debate, but the rarest of political moments, when truth didn't just cut through the noise, it detonated. It was Crockett's flourish, the strike that sealed the moment. We've matched contractor donations to policy rollouts, she said evenly. In every case, major contributions were followed within weeks by enforcement initiatives that directly boosted those same companies' profits. This isn't coincidence, it's coordination, and it's documented. Thornton sat rigid, his confidence evaporating. Dr. Chen tried once more to widen the frame. Even if communication occurred, states still face legitimate border security concerns. But Cooper cut in, firmly this time. A rarity. Dr. Chen, with respect, we need to stay on the evidence. The question isn't whether states can enforce immigration law. It's whether officials coordinated with private companies that profit from those laws, while publicly denying it. Then came the moment that would go viral. Anderson Cooper turned directly to the camera. Not to the panel, not to his notes, to the millions watching at home. His voice carried a weight rarely heard from the usually measured anchor. We need to take a moment here, he said. What we're seeing tonight is unusual. Instead of competing talking points, Congresswoman Crockett has presented verifiable evidence that directly contradicts claims repeated across multiple networks, including this one. The control room, recognizing the magnitude, delayed the commercial break. Cameras stayed fixed. Cooper pressed on. I've moderated hundreds of panels where accusations fly with no resolution. This is different. We have a document. We have verification. And we have an acknowledgement that runs counter to weeks of public statements. Moments like this are rare, and they matter. Turning back to Thornton, Cooper asked the question that cut to the heart of it. Richard, given what we've learned tonight, Do you believe the public deserves a clearer explanation of how these policies are shaped and who profits from them? Thornton shifted in his chair, his discomfort now obvious. Anderson, immigration enforcement is complex. States are responding to a federal failure. The way these communications are being framed ignores legitimate security needs. Cooper interrupted, sharper than before. Richard, that doesn't answer the question. The issue isn't whether enforcement is necessary. It's whether your clients have been truthful about how policy is developed and who's influencing it. The trap closed. Thornton exhaled, offering a half concession. Communication between officials and contractors happens in every administration. To claim these are improper is a political interpretation. That was the surrender, not denial, not spin. Surrender. Crockett, still calm, delivered the defining line. Mr. Thornton just acknowledged what he spent weeks denying, that his clients coordinated policy with companies who profited, and the memo shows they deliberately instructed staff to deny it publicly. That's not routine communication. That's deception. Washington, the Democratic analyst who had been quiet all evening, finally spoke. Anderson, this moment matters beyond the issue itself. For weeks, pointing out this pattern was dismissed as conspiracy. Now we have documentation, and worse, we see a strategy to mislead. That has consequences for how we evaluate claims from all sides. Cooper nodded, then spoke words destined for journalism schools. In today's media environment, we often present all claims as equally valid, leaving viewers adrift. Tonight is a reminder that some claims can be proven or disproven. When that happens, our responsibility is clear: to say so, regardless of which side the facts support. The camera lingered on Thornton, who now stared at his phone, likely reading frantic messages from clients, watching their strategist unravel in real time. Dr. Chen sat in silence, her talking points rendered irrelevant by the memo's cold specificity. At last, the producer signaled. Cooper closed the segment. We need to take a break. When we return, we'll discuss the broader implications of what we've just witnessed and what it means for public trust in policymaking. Viewers didn't see what happened after the cameras cut, but production staff later revealed Thornton ripped off his microphone and stormed out, refusing to continue. By the next morning, the clip had been seen millions of times. The hashtag number sign receipts on CNN trended nationwide. For an audience tired of endless spin, this wasn't just another cable news fight. It was proof that documented truth could still pierce through the noise. The hours after the broadcast felt like aftershocks following an earthquake, ripples of disbelief, scrambling, and sudden recalibration across political and media circles. By sunrise, Governor Landry's office released a terse statement. It confirmed the memo's authenticity, but insisted it had been mischaracterized and ripped from its intended context. Yet nowhere did the statement explain what conceivable context could justify an explicit directive to deny coordination between elected officials and the very corporations profiting from enforcement. For many, the omission spoke louder than the words on the page. Major newspapers wasted no time. Within 24 hours, 3 outlets dispatched investigative teams to track down leads on Crockett's broader allegations, whispers of secret retreats, shadowy meetings, and coordinated agendas spanning multiple states. By midweek, confirmation arrived. Leaked documents revealed that in Colorado, detention executives had sat down with representatives from several governors' offices. They called it the Interstate Enforcement Initiative, a sterile phrase that masked the reality. Policy blueprints drafted behind closed doors by those set to profit. For Richard Thornton, the fallout was swift and brutal. His polished veneer as a trusted strategist cracked almost instantly. Within 48 hours, 2 governors dropped him as their media consultant, citing a loss of confidence. In Washington's ruthless world of political optics, being exposed as dishonest on live television is the kiss of death. By week's end, Thornton's firm issued the sanitized press release. He was taking time with family. Everyone knew what that really meant. His career, carefully built over decades, had collapsed in a single broadcast. But the personal drama was only a thread in a much larger unraveling. Anderson Cooper's decision to abandon the safe, both sides formula became a flashpoint. Journalism professors dissected the moment in classrooms. Media critics debated whether anchors should risk making clear distinctions between spin and verifiable fact. Inside CNN, executives pored over the numbers. Not just record-breaking viewership that night, but sustained engagement across podcasts, social clips, and digital platforms. The data revealed something unmistakable. Audiences were hungry for clarity, for the rare moment when truth pierced through the noise. Cooper himself later reflected on his podcast, his voice carrying the weariness of a journalist who had wrestled with the profession's unwritten codes. We're trained to present competing viewpoints without appearing to judge. But when verifiable evidence directly contradicts repeated claims, pretending neutrality becomes a disservice. In those moments, we owe it to viewers to draw the line between what's been proven and what's still contested. For Congresswoman Crockett, the impact was transformative. Once known primarily to progressive insiders, she was now a household name, an emblem of preparation, precision, and persistence. Sunday shows that had ignored her now vied for her presence. Her social media following ballooned overnight. But more than visibility, her credibility surged. The House Oversight Committee, once dismissed as engaging in partisan theater, now commanded newfound legitimacy. That credibility emboldened others. Within 6 weeks, 3 additional whistleblowers stepped forward, carrying their own documents, emails, notes, receipts. Together, their evidence formed the spine of a sweeping 347-page report. Its findings were damning, a systematic effort to coordinate enforcement policies with private detention contractors, while instructing officials to deny that coordination to the public. The paper trail included contracts, financial ledgers, and even strategy memos. The facade of separation between policy and profit was shattered. Markets reacted with merciless efficiency. Shares in the 2 largest detention corporations plummeted more than 30%. Investors, suddenly aware of looming legal and regulatory risks, fled. Class action lawsuits quickly followed, accusing executives of concealing how their companies secured lucrative state contracts. Yet the deepest tremor was cultural, not financial. Editorial boards across the spectrum, from conservative stalwarts to progressive voices, echoed the same unease. Regardless of where one stood on immigration, the deliberate concealment of corporate influence in public policy eroded the trust on which democracy rests. 2 months later, Cooper returned to the subject in a prime-time special. He gathered experts in ethics, campaign finance, and immigration to strip the issue of partisan rhetoric and address the core principle: transparency. His opening words framed the stakes with rare clarity. This isn't about whether you support or oppose a particular policy. It's about whether the public deserves to know who is shaping that policy and why. When corporations profit directly from outcomes they secretly helped design, while leaders deny that influence, accountability breaks down. That breakdown should concern every citizen, left, right, or center. The segment became required viewing in journalism schools. The Poynter Institute even built a training module around it, examining how anchors should navigate moments when evidence disproves official claims. Across networks, subtle shifts began. Producers prioritized guests who came armed with specifics rather than slogans. fact-checking protocols tightened. Audiences noticed the difference. The Crockett moment had done more than expose one memo, one strategist, or one governor's office. It had cracked open a window to a deeper truth, that the fight over who controls the narrative is inseparable from the fight over who controls policy itself. And for a brief, electric moment, the public saw that truth unfiltered. The ripple effects of that single exchange extended far beyond the studio lights. Within weeks, it became clear this wasn't just another viral media clip. It was a hinge moment in how truth, power, and accountability were contested in the public square. For the networks, the shock was immediate. Researchers tracking discourse across major outlets noticed something striking. The phrase, "Where's your evidence?" once a rarity in televised debates, saw its use surge by more than 200% in just 1 year. Suddenly, anchors and panelists were no longer satisfied with polished rhetoric. Guests who came armed only with talking points found themselves cornered, pressed to back their claims with receipts or risk public humiliation. It was a small but meaningful recalibration, a reminder that performance alone could no longer carry the weight of credibility. For viewers, the moment landed with rare clarity. In a media landscape often drowning in noise, it cut through like a clean blade. Social media feeds filled with comments from ordinary citizens who, for once, felt they were not being treated as passive spectators, but as thinking participants in democracy. One YouTube comment on CNN's repost of the segment captured the sentiment bluntly. "I don't care about parties. I just want to know what's true. This is what journalism should be." That hunger for clarity, for truth over spin, proved deeper and more enduring than many industry insiders had imagined. Anderson Cooper himself reflected later on what the experience had taught him. "As journalists, we're trained to ask questions," he said in an anniversary interview marking 3 decades in the field. But questions alone aren't always enough. Sometimes, when evidence has definitively answered them, our duty is to help viewers see that clearly. Those moments are rare, but they're essential to a functioning democracy. His words carried the weight of experience, but also the quiet urgency of someone who knew how fragile those moments could be. For Congresswoman Crockett, the exchange was more than a turning point in her career. It was a validation of her philosophy. In a commencement address to law students at her alma mater, she distilled the lesson. Preparation matters more than performance. In an age of sound bites, there is still no substitute for doing the work, finding the documents, verifying the facts, presenting evidence. To her, the confrontation had never been about spectacle. It was about discipline, integrity, and the belief that truth, when unearthed and presented methodically, could still prevail. The legacy of that evening stretched far beyond immigration policy or media criticism. It became a parable about the fragile but enduring power of evidence in an age addicted to narratives. It showed that even in the high-decibel arena of modern politics, there are still rare flashes when spin collapses, and the weight of verifiable fact reclaims center stage. That lesson did not fade quietly. Media schools built case studies around it. News producers quietly shifted their booking strategies, prioritizing guests who could prove their claims rather than merely deliver them with flair. And viewers, perhaps without realizing it, began to expect more. The appetite for clarity, once dismissed as idealistic, was revealed to be not only present, but urgent. The confrontation between Crockett, Thornton, and Cooper reminded us that journalism at its best is not entertainment, but a civic service. It showed that truth, when pursued relentlessly, has the power to puncture the most carefully engineered performances. For those who watched live, it was a jolt of recognition. That amid the blur of partisanship, the demand for evidence remains one of the few universally understood languages of democracy. If you found this exploration of media accountability insightful, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We're committed to spotlighting those rare moments when truth cuts through the noise. And let us know in the comments, what other instances have you seen where evidence triumphed over spin? Your perspective helps keep these conversations